everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Shipping Excellence Podcast. Today I have Jason Macht with me, who was previously a director of product at Avant, a Chicago-based fintech, and now he specializes in helping real estate companies scale and grow their businesses using technology and data. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So Jason is going to cover some real-world examples where he's used technology, including AI, to scale real estate businesses from marketing, sales, and operations. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So, I took an interest in really everything to do with AI, back in the early days of ChatGPT. It kind of started out with GitHub's Copilot. And at that time, I had a team of engineers, and I was really interested in, I was able to see just through ChatGPT the power of like what it could actually solve and do. And I knew immediately, it's like, man, we need to find ways to get our team using this. And my mindset, especially when you're dealing with engineering teams, any incremental improvement, those are some of your most expensive resources, right? So if I can improve the velocity of my pod and get them solving problems faster through leveraging some of these tools, I was like, that's an obvious win. Like, how do we do more of that? And so that's kind of where it started for me. This last year, I had the opportunity to work for a couple of real estate investors, predominantly in the wholesale space. And, that's largely a sort of like marketing and sales operation. And, the thing I love about working with, smaller teams and like startups is you have the ability to kind of like build, create, prototype, iterate on ideas quickly. And it was kind of a ripe ground for me to sort of play with some of these different tools. And, my main focus was building out like the tech and data for powering a lot of our marketing efforts. But throughout that, you start to notice things like, I think that could be a good use case for some of these new AI models that are coming out. And the really fun thing for the last several years really has just been the speed at which there's been advances in the power of these models. And it's like 1 week you might have an idea like, it's not quite there. Like literally the next month, it's like, oh, you can solve that problem with a high degree of certainty now. And so, I guess one example that I really enjoyed working on was in the real estate space. There's this concept of it's literally just called driving for dollars. So the idea is you drive around neighborhoods. And literally some of these companies will pay people to drive around and say, yeah, that house looks like a good fixer upper, that house could be one. And they just make a list. At the end of the day, they submit their list, and generally you're trying to reach out to the seller to see if they're interested in selling their house so you can buy it, fix it up, and sell it. So that's a real thing. And that eventually evolved to what's known as like virtual driving for dollars. And so there's actually software out there with the full intent to, hire virtual assistants to go through Google Street View images, and they're literally just clicking through and looking at Google Street View images, and they just make note of the properties. And so as I got involved with the business and I saw this, my first thought was like, why couldn't we just have a vision model do this? Seems way more efficient than, this team of 5 virtual assistants we're paying like $8 an hour, whatever we were paying them, to go do this thing. And so my first thought was like, okay, how do I go build this thing and create a prototype? And, I think the combination, as like the tech in the space has evolved in the last number of years, the power of some of these like low code or like no code solutions, and then you pair that with the APIs available through a lot of these models allow you to really build and prototype an idea pretty quickly. And so that's what I did. I decided to essentially take a list of properties, all the same properties in a given area that we were interested in, the same type of map you would draw to like give to one of these virtual assistants to drive through. We pulled all the addresses. I fed those through Google Street View to get the images for each of the properties. And then I fed those one by one through the model and gave it essentially a custom prompt to identify, what is the quality of the house? Is it a high-end new construction luxury home? Okay, that's 100. I don't want that one. Does it look like the roof is falling off of the house and it needs some it needs a rehabber to come in there and fix it up? give that like, a 20, right? And so I came up with a rubric to have it score it for us on automated fashion. The nice thing is you can also iterate and test on these really quickly, right? So I would test variations of the prompting, the instruction that I would give it to get better outputs. And then you have this sort of like, human in the loop aspect where you reinforce the learning. I wasn't really doing reinforcement learning, but I was able to iterate on the prompting to get better outputs. And that resulted in us, running, 10 or 15,000 records to this that we then used. And this is kind of the crux of it. The reason we were interested in doing that is because in the context of marketing, you need to make sure you're getting a good return on your spend. And so direct mail is a big channel in the real estate sector where you're going to mass market people that you think you have a good chance of maybe buying their house so you can renovate it. We were isolating segments that we knew weren't likely to respond. And so I needed to find the needle in the haystack. I needed another signal in the data to tell me that there might be a reason why they might want to sell. And this was my signal. And so by scoring them, taking that full list, filtering that down to call it, a score of 30 or below, that is the subset that I want to mail and ideally get a higher response. So thereby my return on spend for that campaign should be higher. And as we found was higher. So just to give you an example, we would normally see maybe 0.1% response rate on a campaign. And after we ran a test of this, we saw 3 or 4x the response rate relative to the population we're mailing. At 10 basis points, you're probably going to be break even on the campaign. At 3 or 4x that, you're going to be profitable, and that becomes a viable solution for the business. And so that's just like one example of, I think the ways I think about leveraging AI in the business is you find these sort of like micro optimizations that you can sort of double down on and get, I don't know if you'd call that an edge, but it's the type of thing that not everybody's doing. And if I can find ways to differentiate it myself, leveraging some of these tools, I think there's a tremendous amount of power there. And you just kind of, take this laser focus on those areas where you can get the most leverage.
I think I would certainly call that an edge because, to your point, not all businesses are doing that, right? And so if your clients, your businesses are employing some of these techniques, they're more profitable, right? Their return on investment for their spend is much more efficient, right? And so that gives them a lot more runway to
Right.
Do additional marketing efforts or improve the service that they're providing, or could find additional homes, right? So scale their business. And so I think that certainly gives them an edge when they're trying to grow their business, right? Anytime you can make a business run more efficiently, it frees up, capital, whether that be
For sure.
a person's time or the money that you have to spend in other areas of business. So I'd call it an edge. And I think that's really cool, So take note, real estate companies, you should be doing some form of this. But I got a question. So that makes sense for, I think this would be the real estate, company. So like the institutional real estate investor, right? And then the individual real estate investors who maybe have, larger portfolios or do some kind of volume, right? So it's not like
That's right.
probably not that effective for like the person who's buying 1 or 2 homes a year, right?
I think that's right. Yeah,
What about,
it makes sense at scale.
what about like, or give me your thoughts. Do you think this could be applied to people who are looking to buy their next home? Like, could they, and when I ask this, it's not like they would build a product to do this, but the Zillows of the world who are selling, ad space and are platforms for people to sell homes, is there some kind of application for this type of technology to help the consumer, right? There will be a value add to their business.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like my particular use case was really geared towards kind of like a niche, right? And that niche is, wholesale or fix and flip real estate. And the thing that they're trying to solve for is like, how do I improve my return on spend? In the consumer space or like, retail home buyer, I think it's harder to say. This is the kind of thing I think makes sense at like, at scale when you're doing kind of a marketing effort. Not sure how it apply to like that someone looking for a home, let's say. The other challenge too is things like you're only as good as the data that you have available to you, right? So even something like Google Street View images, if you notice, you'll go in there, it might be like from like 2019, And if you like drive by that today, like the house might be knocked down, right? So there's this like recency aspect of like for on an individual data or like home perspective, it might not be the most recent data, but at scale, you're going to have a larger number of occurrences where it kind of like fits that I think really well.
Yeah. So I know another thing we talked about previously was, how this applies to like sales and, lead motivation, scoring versus, new leads versus existing leads. And I found that particularly interesting, which is why I wanted to talk to you today here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've come across this problem a number of times, and especially like any sales organization. I've seen a lot with, my clients now where the problem is kind of around how do I know which leads are the ones I should be spending my time on or the sales team should be spending their time on? And there's always this kind of like push and pull with most organizations where there's obviously a big emphasis on marketing. How do I get new leads in the system and how do I, keep on moving? But once you get in the system, then the next question is like, then what happens? Usually there's like a very, there's a sales process and a sales cycle and there's like this early stage filtering, like hot lead, warm lead, cold lead, long-term follow-up, dead lead, right? Once it gets past there, it's usually an abyss, right? It's like a black box, and these leads, no one knows where they go. They're somewhere in the CRM, and the pattern I've seen is, there's some instrumentation in place to do follow-ups. The more sophisticated operators will have really dialed in follow-up processes and segmentation and automated drip campaigns and automated emails that go out in SMS and direct mail that might do a follow-up touch. But in the vast majority of the cases where that's not happening, it's kind of the sales team or the lead manager's responsibility to randomly reach out or call them or text them. So the question then becomes, how do I prioritize? If you have a team of 5 and you have thousands or tens of thousands of leads in the system, how do you actually like sift through the noise? And again, the same idea is like, how do I find the signal? Because at the end of the day, you want output, you want results, you want revenue, and you don't want to waste time. And so the same sort of aha moment came like, hey, like how can I take all of this data and do something with it using these models to provide that signal? And I think that's one of the like really powerful things with these language models is you have this ability to take unstructured data and transform it into structured data that then can tell you something you can act on. And so the idea that I had was, what if we were just able to suck in all of the account notes for all of the leads in the entire CRM? And then what if I could just feed that into a model? And the same concept as this vision model use case was, I'll just have it score on the particular characteristics of the conversation. Did it check all the boxes of things that we were looking for? Did the lead have motivation? And can I tell that from the notes? Did they articulate a price that they were looking for? Do they have a timeline that they're on? And through sort of the combination of those elements, I can then have it provide a score, provide a summary of all those elements, and I can actually have it extract the information from that, so I can get the most relevant pieces of information that I need to know to make a decision. And at the end of that, provide a score that I can then essentially feed back to the team. And then once you have that, you essentially have your forced ranked list. This is the 1,000 leads in your system ranked by motivation score, or however you would adapt that for your particular business. And it's like, start here and work your way down. And it takes sort of the guesswork of who to follow up with, or, it becomes less process based. Like, okay, we're going to follow up in 30 days. It's like, no, these guys were ready to go next week. They're at the top of the list. You need to work your way from the top down. And, again, the mindset there being is like, how do I take a vast amount of data to pare that down, extract the essence of the most important things, and then use that to really focus the team and the efforts and energy.
What's interesting about that is, I think this is the common misconception is like people think the data needs to be structured, and we went from relational database systems to decade 15 years ago, 2 decades ago, to NoSQL databases, so non-relational to what we have now. And, like non-relational databases were still structured data, right? You had JSON blobs and documents. Like you still had some kind of containerization and structure to them. But now you can take literally just any kind of data, just notes, pictures, sound. You can take that data and run it through some kind of agentic workflow process and derive meaningful value from it. And so it sounds like that's what you guys did. You got sales reps on calls talking to prospects and leads, and they're collecting all this information. And even like that human part of the process can be error prone. They don't necessarily write those notes down, or maybe they forget a note to include. But it sounds like you took the notes and some of the additional information that's a part of that CRM to rank these leads by the ones that need to be touched first and most often. I could see a world where you take sales calls and feed that into that process too, or through a different agent, right? Different AI agent, but for the overall workflow, and get additional meaning out of it.
Absolutely. And we also did that. So.
Oh, you did do that. Okay. All right. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah.
Like big picture is, I think AI in my mind is it's not a silver bullet, right? And it is kind of a Swiss Army knife, but it's just like a tool in the toolkit. And I think if you spend enough time with it, you start to understand the capabilities and the gaps. You start to understand which models apply to which use cases and which ones are stronger in different domains, right? I tend to gravitate towards OpenAI's model suite. There's, Anthropic, Claude. Some people like that for coding more. There's all these sort of different flavors that you can interact with. And I think just spending some time with it, you can then start to understand what are the capabilities. And then it's like, when you come across a problem, whether it's a business problem or an operational problem or whatever it might be, you can then sort of like, I think I could do something with that here. How might I do that? And you now have sort of the freedom to experiment with these things. And I think the other thing I would add to that is the AI is also sort of like your, pocket engineer, or you're like your pocket data analyst, and you might not be familiar with a particular platform, but you can rely on it to like get to the thing that you're trying to do faster and get to an answer faster. And so it helps not only on the solutioning, but also like through the iteration of trying to solution it and actually code the thing, or, whatever the application might be.
Yeah. Are you finding the ideas for these applications are coming from your head, coming from the business owner head? Is it a combination of discussions, with, people in the business and yourself? And your expertise with technology? How are you discovering the ideas and the applications of this technology?
Yeah, I think it depends. What's that? Like, I can visualize this like bell curve is like the early adopter, and then there's like everyone's doing it, and then it's like, at the end of that, nobody cares kind of thing, or the late adopters. I think it just depends on where on that spectrum you are. Like, I happen to be like one of the earlier adopters, I would say, and so I was just very curious on like exploring kind of the boundaries of some of these things. And so that, in my experience, generates a lot of ideas. What I've found so far is people then like react to those ideas, and they're like, oh, that's great. Like, how do I do that in my business? Or how can we leverage that? And that starts the conversation. I'm trying to think if I've come across some other applications of ideas that people brought to me. But at some point, people have a lot of the same ideas, and you'll see some of the commonalities, and that sort of points you in the right direction of like, oh, I should like zero in on that a little bit more, and try to figure out, how do I solve that problem?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we covered sales and marketing, and I want to talk a little bit about how you've seen this. This is the space that I like to play in. This like operational efficiency, which I guess, technically the drive for dollars example is operational efficiency, but ultimately to drive sales.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about like, the operational efficiency you've made with like QA. Call monitoring.
Yeah. So bigger picture here. I mean, a lot of what people have talked about, and I think what you see a lot of the headlines on is, on the like call center side, right? It's like chat bots, it's like AI, like phone agents, and replacing kind of those those, I don't want to call them low level, but like, kind of like the entry level type roles of, support specialists, and how do we leverage, basically how do you get information to the end user or customer faster? And the way I think about it is like upskilling the people that are taking those calls now to have them focus on like more complex problems. And so, I think on the operations side, there's a ton of like already in production applications of this. Some like big companies have already repositioned a lot of their teams that are handling, low level questions. Like back in my credit card days, you'd be amazed at how many people just call in to like check their balance, right? Or know when their next payment is. And it's like, well, look, we built an entire web UI just so you could find this out. People are still calling in. So how do you deflect that, right? Because there's a large cost to support that. But so taking that a step further, even on the operations side, call quality control is an important thing to a lot of businesses, right? Like how do I know that we're answering the phones the right way? How do I know that we're answering questions the right way? How do I know we're presenting the company and the brand in the right way based on the way we, as a brand, we want to be, representing ourselves and talking to people? And the same goes true for on the sales side, right? On the sales process, how do I know we're having powerful conversations with our prospects and increasing the likelihood that that's going to convert into a sale or into a transaction, right? And what I've seen in a lot of businesses, like that's like the unknown that you never really have it's hard to like fully grasp, right? Like you train and you hire and you coach and you do everything in your power to get the best results, but it's hard to do that sort of with any degree of certainty other than measuring the outputs, right? But if you're not getting the outputs that you are expecting, where's the problem? Like how do you pinpoint that? And so again, we saw the same problem. The question was like, okay, how do we fix this? Like how do we answer that? And at the time, I think like one of the transcription models was just coming out and getting much better, and the costs were reducing. I was like, we could easily transcribe all of our calls, same concepts, give it a rubric and the things that we're looking for to extract it. Same idea again, you're taking unstructured data, you're taking call recordings of a conversation that, can tend to go all over the place. They could go on for, dozens of minutes, if not hours. And the manpower you would need to actually like manually review and score these is a lot. You can't get 100% coverage, right? And then it's even hard to cherry pick the calls that you think you're going to get the most out of from like just a observation perspective, like a coaching and training perspective. And so that was the genesis of like, okay, how do we get more out of this? And so ended up standing up a service to essentially take all the call recordings, which you can, most cases, like if you're using like a Twilio or many of these platforms, you can connect directly to their API. A lot of them are already transcribing it, so maybe you don't even need that. Some of them are even maybe scoring it, and there are a number of solutions out there that would do a lot of this for you. But the idea was like take that transcription, run it through our own internal sort of QA scoring rubric, and then that would enable us to then score it. Like, was it a sales call? Was it a information gathering screening call? Was it a hey, like you got the wrong number, stop mailing me, that type of call? You could then sort of easily tag and categorize them, which is largely what some of these AI models were designed to do. So it solves that problem, and then you score it against your own sort of rubric on this is what a good call looks like, this is what a bad call looks like, and then that becomes it takes thousands of calls and reduces it down to, hey, here's your top 10% of the best calls that you can use for training of like, hey, here's what a good call looks like. Here's the bottom 10% that you can learn from and either do training on an individual level or with a team to help them just improve their overall skill set when they're on the phone with prospects. And so, again, that was the idea of like, if I wanted to really tap into that and use the call data to inform training and the overall operations of either the sales team or either customer support team, you can leverage these models to help provide that insight. And so that was sort of the application that we used.
Where do you, so I saw a commercial, I think on LinkedIn recently, and it was of an AI call bot, right? So the AI was doing the conversation, it was responding to the human, and it was prompted or designed to, collect information, right? So through a process, right? Where do you think we are, I guess in terms of number of months or years, we got to talk in months because it's evolved so quickly, where
sure.
you don't need necessarily the solution of call monitoring because you can just automate the call itself.
Yeah. Totally fair point. Yeah, I mean, at some point you could see sort of on the spectrum like that goes away altogether and becomes irrelevant. I think where we're at right now is that these AI agents, the call agents, and that are like just now getting to the point like the latency is low. OpenAI just came out with their real-time API. It's actually, I demoed it and tested it. It's actually really good. It feels more natural. So I think there's kind of like two things that need to happen. First of all, I don't think it's going to happen overnight where like everything just becomes AI call agents, right? I think there's kind of like two dimensions. Like one is like the level of complexity and nuance of the call and the interaction. At the end of the day, we're still humans and we still need some element of human interaction through whatever we're doing. I believe, right? Like I don't think that doesn't go away. If it does, I think we have bigger problems on our on our hand. And so I think in a sales process or whatever it may be, or even just like consulting, and there's still this element of like you're dealing with more complex problems, and that needs the individual. Where I think these AI agents fit in is kind of like the rudimentary, kind of like everyday stuff of like, hey, I'm calling a restaurant because they don't have online booking and they only take phone calls, but like, at least I can do that with a AI agent. Actually, I think Google launched that. Well, they'll do that on your behalf, which is pretty awesome. Or just even like the stuff I talked about before where people are calling to check their balance. Like, I don't know that I need to talk to a person to do that. And you can solve that problem with an AI agent. Like the complexity of the problem is, reduced enough where that fills in that purpose. And, it's kind of like this transitional phase, I think, that we would be in where like that is the medium and that is like the interaction. But I do think the agents are getting good. And frankly, like I don't mind it. And so I think that's the other dimension of this is sort of like the cultural adaptation or like exception of using these and interfacing them with them on a regular basis. That's kind of like the new thing. And I think that will transition. Right now, it's kind of like a little weird and maybe off-putting. At some point, I think that perception changes. So they're like, oh yeah, like that's just how it is, right? And you get more accustomed to talking to an AI, and you wouldn't think twice about it. I came across an example recently. I like almost never have fast food, but I went through and the drive-through was AI, and it was human assisted AI, and I was like, this makes a ton of sense. Like, not to say like you want to replace all the people with fast food restaurant jobs, but it takes the order, reads through the screen. Like that process is pretty basic. The menu is pretty fixed. It's like yes, no, add that, take that off. And I was like, this is an amazing application. I was amazed that the companies were already adopting it at that level. And then, something goes wrong. There's someone there to like intervene and course correct. I think you're going to see more and more of that embedded in different areas. And at some point, it's just going to become broadly accepted. So I think we're there now already, early adoption phase. I think you'll see more and more of that. And I think it'll just become status quo. It's become normal.
Yeah, I agree. Fun fact, this is, not too long ago, but long enough ago, I worked on automating a fast serve restaurant ordering system using AI. It was really cool.
You might have built that one.
Then. It was all secret, it was really cool. And then, even with the call automation using AI, I still think it's a part of like an overall agentic workflow where you've got maybe one AI, taking the call, you've got another one listening in on the call to score it. And then you still, ultimately, I don't think we're ever out of the world, at least for the next decade, where there's some human in the loop. So ultimately, you've got to have a human kind of looking at that because, again, humans own businesses, and humans want the businesses to operate
Right.
well and to provide
Yeah.
good service. So, I think for a while, everyone was worried that all the software engineers' jobs were going to be replaced, and I was like, I use AI, in coding, and I think, it's certainly augmenting the work, but I think there's still like really high level stuff that AI can't do, right? Like it can do architecture even now, but it can't design the system to purpose fit the business problem. So you still need humans for that. So
Yeah, it's just like it's a lever, right? And it provides leverage, right? So with a little less effort, you get way more output. And that's kind of how I think of it in the context of engineering and code development or writing, right? Like I've never personally loved writing extensively, but you can have an idea and use it to outline that and provide more structure, and then fill in the detail, and then you can kind of be the editor, right? So like these applications of like AI driven content creation, right? It's just another lever where I can get more output faster with similar or even better results. Like I think some of these AIs write better than I probably could. Right? so it's super helpful in the context of coding, right? It's like if I can just like mitigate my bug rate, right, my error rate, just by a little bit, even just by have it like seeing what I'm doing in the background and calling that out, the amount of time you save, like how much time have you spent debugging code, and it's like so you're scratching your head trying to figure out what happened. So like these are like optimizations of different areas where you can embed these AI tools. It's like a compounding effect in everything you're doing, whether it's in the business, and it's all the things we talked about. It's like an optimization on the marketing side, an optimization on the sales side, then optimization on the operational side. It's like the multiplication of those optimizations across the business is massive. And I think if you're thinking about AI in that way and integrating it into your business that way, you can have much better results and returns. And ultimately, I think that's like what everyone's after, right? And so that's kind of how I think about injecting this into a given business.
100%. I mean, for me, it's the cognitive load that it reduces. Like, as there's so many things to do when you're running a business, and like I can't keep it all in my head. And then when I need to do something very tactical, like if I don't have to, my brain doesn't have to work that hard to execute on the tactical thing, and AI can help me, and it's at a minimum as good as I would do on my own. Ideally it's better because it's the machine doing it, right? If it can do that, then I'm 100% I'm going to pay for that, and I do. Pay for Cursor, I pay for GPT, I pay for Claude. Like I use Gemini 2.0 came out, by the way. Have you got a chance to play with it? I heard it's like amazing.
I've heard good things. I've not, for whatever reason though, it was early stage. I was a little turned off by Gemini because I played with it, and I was like, I didn't quite get it. The outputs I was looking for, it just wasn't quite comprehensive enough. I did hear the new one is good. I have used it. What I love, and I think that the edge that Google has is like, I don't know about you, but for me, I use almost all Google products, and the fact that it's like natively already there, and it's just like, hey, like use me, like it's been kind of begging for adoption for some time.
It's always right there at the top of the bar. It's like, hey, try this now.
But it's actually getting really good, and they've actually made leaps and bounds in terms of like how it interfaces with their existing things, whether it's like Google Docs or I was recently doing some work in Colab, which is their like Python Jupyter notebook, right? And it's right there, and you can interact with it, and it knows everything that's kind of the contextual stuff of what you're working on. And so that's actually pretty big, because the world before, which when I say world, that was like, last month, but you'd have to like copy paste into like ChatGPT or one of these other things and iterate there, and you'd be back and forth. So like where I see this is going is you'll continue to have this like deeper integration into the workspaces, the places you're already doing your work, whether it's, Google Docs, Google Sheets, things of that nature. You mentioned Cursor. So like you have like the IDE, and it's everything that was sort of built with AI in mind in the actual coding environment. You're starting to see that ChatGPT is coming out with they just had like the 12 days of OpenAI or whatever they called it, where they're trying to come out with features where it's more of that embedded experience, right? They're coming out with projects, and you can like upload all the context of whatever it is you're working on, whether it's more of a writing type of application, or if it's you're actually coding. And I've seen people like upload entire code bases, entire repositories into it, and then they use it to like interact with the code and actually like re-engineer features within it. So I think you're starting to see these more integrated experiences where you can do more within each of them. My mindset right now is I'm sort of agnostic to which one I'm using. I think it's all about sort of the use case and wherever it is that I'm working and whatever works best with that particular interaction.
Same. I agreed. I use them all except for Gemini, which I am now going to start using. And I never bought it for Google. I'm a Google guy too. I use Google products. I never bought it for my Google Workspace because, bad taste the first time around.
Yeah.
They just missed. And, I think the good thing is Google has all of the power of Google behind it. And so when they saw what happened, they were like, oh, it's time to play game. And so game on. Exactly. And so, I'm excited. I'm going to buy it for our workspace now, and hopefully I get to receive the same productivity gains that I get when I'm just when I was doing the copy and paste, but now it's just kind of embedded. So
no, it's great. So I'm excited to see where all of it kind of arrives, and it's been fun to watch it evolve.
Yeah, it has. Well, Jason, man, this was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation. You talked about some like very tangible, very real world examples of how people are using technology, data, and in particularly AI, which is what this show's about. And so thanks for coming. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, man. Have a good one.
See ya.